Hello, Miss Erica and 8th grade class. I have a story to tell about with my grandmother, Carol Clark.
Hi.
Hey,
Hi.
Grandma, do you have a story to tell about my great great grandma?
I do. Your great great grandmother's name was Mary Ellen Bayard Park, and she was born in 1890 in Woodland, Maine. She lived most of her life in a very rural area on a farm, and something that was uncommon at the time is she went to school till just about high school, which was not usual for girls in poor rural areas. And she also had become very, very interested in movies and newsreels, which was how a lot of people got their news at that time. And through the reels, she heard about this thing called the woman's suffrage. And it was the fight for women to get the right to vote.
Why do you think Mrs. Friddle,
It's okay. Keep going.
Mrs. B, Mrs. Ellen Bayard,
So you can,
Bayard Park was so influenced by the women's suffrage movement?
her family had come to the United States about 20 years before her, 40 years before her her grandparents immigrated from Ireland and England, and so they were very uh, independent people who decided they wanted to come for a better life. So that was part of how she was raised, and it was also a time when people were talking about the right to vote. Not too many years, just a generation after the Civil War, where it was very much about people having their rights. And she, I've lost my train of thought. Okay. Uh, because she was so very independent, when she heard about this movement, she decided as a young girl that she was not going to marry until women got the right to vote
In 1920.
in 1920. So, because she was a young woman uh, in in that kind of environment at that time, not getting married was not a very acceptable decision for a young woman. So she eventually accepted an offer of marriage from my grandfather, Carl Park, and they married in 1918. And my mother, her first child was born in 1919, and the women got the right to vote in 1920. And she was very excited about that. She was very happy that her daughter was going to grow up having the right to vote.
Do you have any stories about when you were little, when she was still with us?
Oh yes, she her husband died when she was in her 60s, and because she had not worked in her life, she had no income. So she became a caretaker for people her age and older who could not take care of themselves. And she would live in their home and take care of them. And she would take the bus from the city that she lived in to our town and then walk up to our house. And she was doing this in her 60s, her 70s, and her 80s and her 90s. She was, in fact, babysitting for your cousins when she was 91 and 92 in, in your great grandparents' home. Yeah. So she was very independent, uh, always opinionated, always uh, having things to say about social issues. even from way back in that time.
Yeah.
Would you like me to show you a picture?
Sure.
I can zoom in on it too when we're ready.
Okay.
Very good.
And she was all of about 5'1".
Well, I heard like a little thing that the human species is starting to evolve to get even more taller. So maybe that's why she was only 5'1".
Yes. Any other questions?
Well, I think that will just be it.
Okay.
Thank you for telling me her story.
Alrighty. My pleasure.
And thank you, Miss Erica and the class, for letting me interview my grandma.